Singapore is a popular study destination for those thinking of studying abroad, but why is that? In this video, we're going to look at all the reasons why you'd want to study in Singapore, along with some disadvantages of choosing Singapore as your study abroad destination, so that you'll be fully informed before you make your decision. You're watching the second episode of our International Student Guide series, where we give you all the information you need to know about studying abroad in Singapore. So if you aren't caught up on how Singapore's education system works, check out our first video where we go through the full educational timeline. Starting off with one of the most defining reasons why Singapore is such a popular study destination, our highly regarded education system. Ranked as one of the best in the world in terms of academic performance, Singapore's education has a focus on STEM subjects, which are incredibly important in the current growing jobscape. On top of that, Singapore has some of the best universities in the world, with the National University of Singapore and Nanyang Technical University ranked at 8th and 15th on the QS World University rankings. While this definitely makes Singapore a solid choice if you want a strong academic background, it may also lead to a strong point against studying in Singapore: the competitive and stressful environment. As expected with a more advanced syllabus, students are expected to study and learn more than other countries. On top of that, as we've discovered in our previous video, students in Singapore must sit for several national exams at different stages of their education, starting as early as age 12, to demonstrate their grasp of key subjects. The result of these exams will be placed against other students across the country to determine your secondary, post-secondary, and higher education. This can create a lot of stress for a student, with a study showing 90% of secondary school students reporting stressful experiences stemming from academic study. Singapore's education is largely merit-based, with students advancing according to their academic performance. This approach ensures that factors like wealth or family background don't influence school placements. However, it also fosters a highly competitive environment where students not only strive for top test scores, but also engage in additional activities such as extra school hours or securing leadership roles in co-curricular activities. Overall, it can safely be said that Singapore puts strong emphasis on education and student development, which is not only seen in its syllabus, but also the systems and the activities put in place to encourage the students to do and learn more. Another pro of studying in Singapore is the cost. For an international student, a university degree in Singapore will cost between $13,400 to $22,600. This is compared to other countries such as Canada, where it costs an average $26,000, and in the US, it costs anywhere between $25,000 to $50,000. In Singapore, we have something called a tuition grant. It is a grant offered to international students in Singapore that greatly subsidizes tuition costs by more than 50%. In exchange, students must work in Singapore for 3 years after graduating. Though tuition is cheap, Singapore is infamous for a high cost of living. This comes mostly from the high housing and rental prices. If you aren't attending a university with dormitories or plan to live off campus, you'll likely need to rent a studio flat, which can cost anywhere between $1,400 to $2,400. Studio apartments in other countries are much lower, such as in Sydney, where it's about $1,200, or in London, where you could find one at around $1,300. But despite its high cost of living, Singapore is also known for its highly affordable public transport and food options. It is ranked second in a global public transport affordability study, thanks to Singapore's government that subsidizes more than 30% of public transport fees. Concession fares are also given to students all the way to university and a few months post-graduation. In terms of food options, Singapore is renowned for its hawker culture, an integral part of Singapore's identity where one can find hawker centers all over the country. Most can be found just under apartment blocks, making them easily accessible. Stalls here sell food in the $3 to $8 range, or sometimes even lower. Going back to working in Singapore, a pro of choosing to study here is that it's also easy to find jobs here. This is reflected in Singapore's 2022 University Graduate Employment Survey, where over 90% of graduates secured employment within 6 months of graduation, higher than England's 87.7% and Australia's 78.5% for that same year. However, it's important to remember that Singapore is still a small nation, so while job opportunities are easy to come by, you may feel limited in terms of job options. In terms of tech-related jobs, Singapore does have a good amount of options, with headquarters for big names like Samsung, Nvidia, and Google. However, if you're interested in other fields like media and arts, you'll probably have to consider other options overseas. The same goes for universities in Singapore. While there are very prestigious and renowned local universities here, there are significantly less options to choose from compared to other countries. Another major advantage of studying in Singapore is the high likelihood of obtaining a study visa compared to many other countries. Singapore offers a study visa known as a student pass, with an approval rate exceeding 90%. For comparison, the study visa approval rate is around 85% in Australia and 63% in the United States. In addition, other countries have been gradually tightening their visa approval rates. For instance, Australia's study visa approval rate dropped by nearly 30% at the beginning of this year compared to last, while Canada is projected to see a decrease of 45% by year end. In contrast, Singapore's approval rate has remained consistently high and stable. Now, while Singapore can seem like a great place to study and work based off its merits alone, it is important to remember that we're located right on the equator. That means a summer all year round that is both humid and hot. If you're from a country that is used to or has cold weather, you might need a minute to get used to the nation's weather conditions. But no worries, as majority of Singapore's indoor environment is air-conditioned. Finally, another major reason why Singapore is a popular study destination is its multicultural and clean environment. With 4 core languages, English, Malay, Chinese, and Tamil, and groups and accommodations for people of all cultures, it's easy to find a home here and not feel excluded. It's also nice to be able to meet and interact with others from all kinds of different backgrounds and gather lots of international experience. Singapore is also known to be one of the cleanest cities in the world. This is due to its Sustainable Development Goals, a list of goals that Singapore hopes to uphold to remain eco-friendly. These have led to initiatives like waste efficiency, where our country's waste is turned to energy, strict anti-littering laws, and many others. So, those were the biggest pros and cons of studying in Singapore. You can weigh these details any way you like to make the most informed decision before you take the major step of choosing to study abroad. If you want to know more about your options for education in Singapore, keep a lookout for our next video in this series where we go in depth into exactly how to study in Singapore as an international student. Until then, thanks for watching.